Hey,
How are you both?
Hey Jack, I'm great.
I'm good. I'm really good, JB. Good to see you again.
Gonna-
Good to see you,
Before
Sarah.
before we introduce our special guest, CJ, we're going to go straight into into your beautiful acknowledgement that you always do. So let's go into that, brother.
All right. Well, today I'm on in Brisbane, back in my engine. So this side of Maiwa, which is the river, where the Yagara people are. So Turrbal on the north side, Yagara on the south. So pay my respects to the people here. Acknowledge country that I'm on this country, and always great to be here. I spent a lot of time in this place, and I have to shout out to our elders as well. Um, for getting us here, making this world we live in at the moment what it is today. So basically, I do want to have a shout out to my people up in Iringi, up in Cairns, and at Gimu, and then up in the Torres Straits where Dad's from. He's uh, from Bardu Island, so Bardigal people.
Be- Beautifully said, brother, as per normal.
Mm,
So thank
mm.
you for that. I too just want to acknowledge all our traditional custodians wherever we work, meet, and play, and just pay the utmost respects to all our old people, our ancestors, for getting us where we are today, doing the hard yards. We might think we've got it hard at times, but with what they've been through and forged the way for us, I suppose, if you like. So I just want to thank them. I also want to thank my mob, the Muddy Muddy people down there in southwestern New South Wales, and just pay the utmost respects to all our, again, all our old peoples, our ancestors. And I'm on bachelor country at the moment, so up here in Tugum. So, and just for everyone's information, a little bit of trivia. Tugum means place of rest.
Yep.
So, and it's such a beautiful place it is too. So, anyone that's watching or having a look, come and visit Tugum.
True.
Now, I want to introduce.
Can I acknowledge too, Jack, that I'm joining from the unique and beautiful lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Great Kulin Nation, much further south than where you both are. And just what a privilege it is to be able to live on this land and raise my children and do my work. It's been a great privilege for most of my late teenage and adult life to be here. So
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Now, you did jump in a little bit early there, Sarah, but we'll forgive you for that. So that's okay. I just want to introduce Professor Sarah Wise, and we're just going to have a yarn about some of the stuff, a little bit of your background, and a little bit about the stuff that you do. So I know a little bit about it, but we'd love to hear a bit more because it's. I heard a couple of stories last week, so I'm not going to tell you what to say, all right? But I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and I'm sure CJ would as well, and I'm sure our viewers would as well. So over to you, Professor Sarah Wise.
Oh, Jack, and Charlie, thank you. So you steer me because where you think what you want to hear and what you think your viewers might want to hear as well. So as you say, I did jump in terms of where I am. So this is where I am and where I'm coming from, and the bigger question is who I am. That's kind of been not a question that I find easy to answer, but apart from my title there on your screen, really I feel in my heart and my being I'm still that child that grew up in Nipaluna, Hobart. That's where I'm from originally. I'm one of 6 children, grew up in a household with lots of loud, noisy children, parents that love children, and we had big extended family, lots of interactions with cousins and grandparents. My grandparents lived at the base of the mountain there in Hobart, and they loved the bush and loved taking me for bushwalks and up the mountain, and it was just a beautiful childhood place, and I've just got a real connection to that place. You know, grew up in a stone house between the mountain and the river, and it was just beautiful. And as well as being, I guess, a sister, a cousin, a daughter, I'm also a mum. You know, I've got 2 young adult children. Angus, he just came back from Asia on Good Friday, and there I was, you know, waiting at the Melbourne arrival gates, all excited, you know, to have my son back. And, you know, that's Angus and his 20-year-old sister, Jemima, and they are my world and my first duty, you know. And, you know, still with their dad, Jeremy, who's a lovely fella. He's got some funny ways, but we're a tight little family, and we're all living here, you know, in Melbourne, as I mentioned before, doing our thing. And came to Naarm when I was 14, so I'm going right back, and my whole family relocated. Dad worked in mining, you know, sort of in Tasmania, you're either in mining or you work for government or you work for welfare. And Dad was in the mining business, and, you know, his job took him over to the mainland, and, you know, we all relocated over here, and, you know, finished my schooling and, you know, started studying at the University of Melbourne, where I'm employed today. And I think I was enrolled at Melbourne Uni as a student for almost 20 years. So
Wow.
that's doing a whole lot of undergraduate study, honours study, master's by research, and then a PhD. And the PhD was, you know, part-time while I was also working full-time and bringing up my children when they were very young. So, you know,
Wow.
kind of got a long relationship and history with the University of Melbourne, but never for a minute did I aspire or think that one day I'd be back here as a professor. That really wasn't something that I ever wanted to do or ever thought that I would do. I just, you know, from that basis of kind of my childhood and, you know, really not realising what a privileged childhood I had, I just thought everybody was able to enjoy love and security and safety in the way that I did. And as I grew older, of course, I realised that that just wasn't the case, and felt very strongly that, you know, I wanted to work in a field where, you know, I could support children and families and, you know, try and help them to be strong. And that's what I did. I studied developmental psychology at the University of Melbourne, felt that practice was not right for me in terms of just who I was in the world. I felt that, you know, I wanted to do something at a more policy level, a bigger level, and something that I think probably was not so intimate and therapeutic, you know, in terms of protecting myself a little bit there. So I went into research, and, you know, that suited me just beautifully. I started my career working for a Commonwealth statutory authority, the Australian Institute of Family Studies, and was lucky enough to be mentored and supported in research and evaluation and public policy, and, you know, really to be supported to be a parent too in that workplace. You know, I was given flexibility and so on, and sort of opportunity there for work-life balance. And, you know, that was really a great start to my career. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work, you know, to support vulnerable children and families, and, you know, was very much a learner and a humble learner kind of in that space. But stayed there for 12 years and obviously gained a lot of experience and certain types of knowledge, you know, through that experience. And then, you know, felt that I needed to get out into the service sector and understand a little bit more about service delivery, about how community services operated, have much stronger interaction, not with so much policymakers now, but with practitioners on the front line. And, you know, worked for 2 big non-government organisations, mainstream organisations in Victoria. So that was Anglicare Victoria and Berry Street. And it was really kind of, you know, there that, you know, developed a little bit more knowledge and interest in sort of transforming systems, not just through services, but seeing some of the struggles in service delivery and some of the limitations that services could have in terms of transforming lives. And then had an opportunity to come back to Melbourne Uni in a joint position. So that's in a partnership between a service delivery organisation and the University of Melbourne. So there's that real strong connection between academia and industry, or service delivery, if you like. And, if I could be honest, a lot of my training, a lot of the professional development, a lot of the knowledge that I learned was not informed by Indigenous knowledges, or, Indigenous wisdom at all. And it was only really as I was maturing in my career did I sort of develop, I think, the relationships and the confidence to know who I was and know what I could contribute in that space, to step into that space a little bit stronger, and to be invited in to conversations and onto projects, and to really start forming relationships that I still have today. So what I do, I'm just talking, Jack and Charlie, is that all right?
It's very interesting, and it's a good backdrop to what you're leading into with your work. I can promise.
All right, so I'll get into the work. So where I find myself today is I work in the Department of Social Work at the University of Melbourne, and I don't teach, so I'm not involved in teaching, social work students and helping them, become professionals. I work purely in research, and in the same field of research as I always have, which is child and family welfare, but today with a much stronger focus on Aboriginal self-determination in child and family welfare, and really working with Indigenous community-controlled organisations to help them document their beautiful cultural practices in family support and child protection work, and to really evidence their family support programs and their child protection programs, so that governments can recognise the real value and the difference that embedding culture in practice makes to Aboriginal families, and so that they can be properly funded and be basically left alone to do things their way and the way that they know works for their communities. So, I feel just so privileged to be able to be working in this space. So in Victoria, I've got really strong relationships with, we call them ACOs here, Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisations like VACA, the Victorian Aboriginal Child and Community Agency, and the Victorian Aboriginal Children and Young People's Alliance, which is, 14 ACOs, an alliance of 14 ACOs, all delivering child and family services and trying to strengthen their organisations to do more, and for some of them to actually take responsibility for the design and delivery of child and family services right a lot across the continuum of support. So from very early prevention, early intervention work, right through to statutory child protection, actually knocking on families' doors, where there's been a report of concern or some serious worries that children might be in danger. So ACOs here in Victoria really want to take on that work, and they've been authorised through the Victorian child and family legislation to actually do that work, to have that authority to do that work. Whereas, typically it was done by government services, and still is to a large extent. We're kind of growing that work. So, as I said, my job is to kind of, help these agencies, because they're still growing their capacity. And, I should have mentioned that I'm a non-Aboriginal woman, in this space, very much working side by side, hand in hand with these agencies to help them document their practices, to build their capacity to undertake research and evaluation, to evidence the success, that they have in delivering these programs, as I said, so that they can be strong and independent in their own right in terms of servicing their community.
Beautiful.
So go.
Now, I've got a couple of questions for you, but firstly, I just want to acknowledge Janet Gilchrist Perez, who is over in California. She's a friend of ours. She does a lot of really good work in the Indian reservations over there with those mobs over there. And she just said, "I want to hear more, but it's late. We'll watch later." Change starts with people like you learning, making a difference. And Berry Street, I was a volunteer there in 1995. So
Oh,
Janet's
wow.
from over here in Australia. She
Yeah.
used to be Lisa's good neighbour, and then moved over to over in California. So yeah,
That's incredible. And
Amazing.
we're looking at the Indian Child Welfare Act and the different legislation in Canada as well, because I think in Victoria, one of the things that the Europe Commission called for was Indigenous specific child and family welfare legislation, even though we've got our ACOs being able to deliver these services. They're still working under, mainstream law. So
yeah,
in
definitely.
terms of, future developments, that's one of the things that is very much on the agenda to, develop Indigenous specific legislation, where, the values, the principles from, Indigenous culture embedded into the legislation.
Beautiful. Now, one of the questions I've got for you is, tell us. I heard a little bit last week, so tell us a little bit about the beautiful trip you had to the NT probably a month ago now, I suppose it is. But tell us a little bit about that, and I just want to. I'd love to hear from you the experience that you had with all those beautiful ladies in the NT, and what happened, what transpired. So
Yeah, that was, thanks for that, Jack, for reminding me of that. I just, get such a beautiful feeling when I remember that visit. So, as I said, I do a number of projects, and one of the opportunities that my team and I have had is actually to work with the NPY Women's Council, evaluating a really exciting new initiative called Nurakuchu, which means one place, which is a way of coordinating child protection in that tri-state region. So the Anangu who live on those lands, who are very mobile people, often have to deal with 3 different child protection systems, and sometimes, don't know where their children are, don't know how to talk to welfare about their children, what's happening in children's cases. It's a very difficult scenario, and they've long called for, one file, one phone, one way of being able to understand what's happening in terms of child and family welfare. And after years and years of advocacy, the Northern Territory, Western Australia and South Australia and the Commonwealth Government have agreed to trial this tri-state child protection hub, which the Anangu have called Nurakuchu, meaning one place. So one place where they can call up or they can walk into, or even child protection practitioners can call if they don't know about a child's history, because it's, there's information across different records held in different jurisdictions. So it's a really beautiful idea, and that's the Anangu vision, that, also the children, that welfare knows about children's family and kinship connections, so that's one of their worries about child protection, that, because information is not in one place, they might not know about, their relatives and kin where they can go and live with and, get support from in terms of their well-being and being raised in culture. So this Nurakuchu is all based on, the Anangu vision, and I was invited in to evaluate it. which as I said, was a great honour. And as is our practice and as is absolutely ethically required, we have to work under Aboriginal leadership and ensure, I'm really accountable to Ananu in terms of how I go about the evaluation, and they need to authorise what I'm doing. And as part of this project, as well as other activity of NPY Women's Council, they have an Ananu lived experience and leadership group. So this is a group of about 12 senior women who meet, not regularly, but they do meet, to talk about the direction of NPY Women's Council on these special projects. And they gathered a few weeks ago in Yulara to talk about Ngurukuchu specifically. And, I had the opportunity to join that workshop meeting to introduce myself and make a connection, with the women, and to really get some authorisation about what I'm doing, share some of the ideas that I had for evaluation, particularly, how to safely engage Ananu in the evaluation, how I should talk to them and get feedback. And, my brief was from NPY Women's Council to just go with the flow, to turn up and just go with the flow. There's a bit of a structure to the workshop, but just, see how it went. So I showed up, with a few ideas and, a few little gifts to thank people for their time, and just stepped into the room. It was an Indigenous education centre. I can't remember the name of the building where we met, but just the warmth in the room, and the women were all there sitting around because I flew in that morning. And the meeting started with an extended prayer, not necessarily acknowledgement, but an extended prayer. And I was just there for 4 or 5 hours, however long the meeting went. We didn't break, there was meals and food, but because we only had, that 4 hours, because the women had to drive back to Alice, I think they had directors' meetings the next day. They had to leave by a certain time. So, it was pretty fast-paced for those sorts of meetings, but there was just this beautiful rhythm to it, Jack. I think I mentioned when I spoke to you that the meeting was all in language. So one of the women was able to translate, and the rhythm was lots of stories about child protection welfare, stories about the hurt, past and present, the worries, a lot of really strong stories and sad stories. And then there was, laughter, stories, different stories, it was joy and laughter. And then there was business, there was things that we had to do, and, questions that they were asked that they had to attend to. And there was just this beautiful rhythm and flow where there was just this, vulnerability in terms of the strong storytelling, but the absolute determination to make things better, and just these women knowing that they had the strength and knowledge to share that could shape change in a really powerful way. Just incredible women, and it was really amazing to be in that space. And I did get an opportunity to talk. I came with some, bit of paper with some diagrams on. I just hid that and just talked, and you just got some really wonderful feedback and advice and guidance from these women about my work, and really felt that I made a connection with those women, and walked away, as I always do with these projects, feeling I've got to do this right. I've committed to this work, and I've really got to do it good.
Sarah, I know you're not one to you're not going to big note or anything, but it was actually a really big success, though, wasn't it? Like, seriously, and the way that you were welcomed in and held in that space, you were able to hold your space to be able to so everyone could work together and get things done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all about me by any stretch of the imagination, but I did feel really comfortable in the space. I mean, I think in
Nice.
terms of, you know, you know, that there was a welcoming spirit
Yeah.
in there. So, you know, that was just beautiful. And as I said, in terms of needing that connection and relationship to be able to move forward with the project, and I can't do it without it. You know, it was amazing. And, you know, they've got the opening, the what they call the formal launch of Nuakuchu at the end of this month. And, you know, I'll be up there and hopefully, you know, seeing some of these women again, and every opportunity I get, I'll, you know, be hoping to talk with them again, and certainly about how they think things are going in terms of how the vision is being, you know, implemented, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always lovely when you go into community like that, and you know, you can feel the passion in the people, and you know, the will and the commitment they have to, you know, helping their community and support their community. And it's really interesting that, like, when we get people to come to those types of workshops and meetings, I guess that they come voluntarily. You know, they want to be there. They're not paid to be there. They just want to be there. You know, and it's you know, it's really nice to have that that kind of, I suppose, vibe in the whole room, if you like. You know, so um,
Yeah, I guess
so my
first time
wife,
in 5 years.
she's going. That's my wife. She's just going to the gym.
Good.
Yeah. So yeah, and I was also thinking, and when you were talking, Sarah, about that, we talk about this a lot, Jack. You know, about the solutions, the community-based solutions that come about. You know, they know what to do. All they need is you know, I guess the Western kind of, how do we how do we structure that, and how do we prove that, how do we, you know, monitor that, and all that kind of stuff. So it really is important that, you know, because of course that's tied up with, you know, trying to gain some more support for those initiatives. You know, yeah.
Yep.
So, and it's great that you were able to do that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, you know, that's kind of the, you know, the balance that you have to strike too, because as you say, I've been invited into that space because I've got some skills and experience, and they're mainly from my Western training, you know, around research and evaluation and how the system works and so on. But I have to go in there with absolute humility in terms of, you know, the Aboriginal people knowing their community and knowing what works and letting them lead the way. And that also, you know, that also refers to, you know, how I go about my work too. They know what's going to work in their community. They know,
Yeah.
you know, how they want research to be conducted. They know what is culturally safe, you know, and what is going to work in terms of having people share their knowledge and wisdom about, you know,
Beautiful.
experiences and so on.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm an absolute learner in that space, and learning in a way that, you know, in a 30-year career, I never have. And, you know, that's what I mean when I say it's an absolute privilege.
Can I just ask you, Sarah, about the evaluation process? So look, CJ and I both know, you know, like working in communities, and you know, a lot of the time, our mobs, you know, English is sometimes sixth or seventh language spoken, and I just want to, like, if you could explain about that evaluation process, and how, like, whether it's, like, you know, I know it's probably got to be a little bit quantitative, but the stuff that we spoke about last week is about the qualitative side of things. So, you know, yes, we need those numbers with the quantitative stuff, but we need to have those stories told and that authentic voice that you were talking about before. So
yeah. And Jack, all I can talk to is kind of my process and my methodology. And some people operate in different paradigms where you know, an Indigenous research paradigm is what they work in. I'm a non-Indigenous person, so I can't work that way. You know, my approach right from the very beginning is a thing called two-eyed seeing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a practice and approach where you see through one eye with the strength of Western knowledge and wisdom, and through the other eye with the strength and knowledge of Indigenous wisdom. And, you know, yeah, so that approach is kind of two-eyed seeing. So it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people coming together, you know, in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding, of, you know, co-design a way forward, but always under Aboriginal leadership. At the end of the day, it's privileging Aboriginal voice and knowledges first, but it's the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people coming together. And the other part of my process is, you know, technical jargon, which is kind of what I call, you know, methodological pluralism, which means rather than leading with a method saying I only do qualitative research or I only do quantitative research, the big stats, what I do is research that's going to answer the problem. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And designing a method and a way around what the question is. So, you know, the process is always, as I said, working hand in hand, you know, with Aboriginal leadership from the very beginning of the process to the very end. And that starts with identifying the question that you want answered. Yeah. So, you know, that might be, you know, a government agency might want to know what the cost benefit of a program is, because they want, you know, to tell Treasury that this is saving the government money, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to design an evaluation around that question. But, you know, local community, they want to know how Aboriginal people experience the program. Do they feel seen, heard, respected? You know, do they feel able to express their culture and be, you know, authentically Indigenous in this service? I don't know, you know, different questions. And that would require a completely different approach. Yeah. So you always start with the questions and then, you know, design a way of collecting story or knowledge or data, you know, to answer that question. And, you know, often the best way is mixing, you know, the numbers. You know, it might be from a survey or it might be from, you know, your data from your administrative database or your client database, mixing that with, you know, the interviews and the yarns, you know, with the people with the lived experience of a service or a program or a problem. And, you know, working with, you know, Aboriginal people to, you know, determine how those conversations, those yarns, those interviews are going to work best. You know, how do they want to, you know, how do they want to go about it? So one of the projects I'm working on now, which is an evaluation of a statutory child protection program in Victoria, I've left it up to the ACOs to engage families, to talk to them about who wants to be part of the evaluation, who wants to talk. Is that, you know, one-on-one talk or is it a family talk? Do they want the talk to happen in the home or at a service or a community space or around a fire pit somewhere? You know, all of these decisions are led by, you know, the participants, you know, for their ease and comfort. So it's about being really flexible. So, you know, so that's kind of the, you know, the approach that I take to evaluation, two-eyed seeing, you know, under Aboriginal and this idea of, you know, methodologically pluralism, you know, making the method or the approach fit the question, really getting the questions right in the first place. But, you know, lived experience, story, Jack, is just so important. And, you know, such an important part of Indigenous research. I couldn't imagine doing a project without it. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Jack, or you want to know more about it?
Oh, no, absolutely. Look, I mean, we do a lot of evaluation on our programs that we run and those sort of things. And it's always good to for an expert, if you like, to be able to come out and explain it a little bit better than what we do as facilitators or as the people that are running those programs. So it's always good to hear that because a lot of the times we go into our communities and as people know, our people are probably the most researched people in the world. So we and it's about being able to give back to community and not have that top down approach.
Yeah.
And I just love that what you're doing, and I think it's very exciting for people to be able to get that authentic voice out there. So I do thank you, and I think it's such an honour for you and to be actually invited in and accepted, and you've done a beautiful job at that. So well done.
That's nice, Jack.
Yeah, no, it's really really important work you do. It's also juggling, I guess, in terms of what needs to be reported and what is needed in the community by community people. You know what I mean? What is the outcome for that community? And it's nice to be able to, deliver on something that has improved, or if it's a service delivery, or if it's actually to do with child protection, if you like. So it's really it's kind of like because Jack and I we've been doing some work around the place. I've had a long history, and it's really important that at least the community can see the benefits of that whole that whole day that we've spent, or the whole week, or that whole project. How it's affecting their community, and also how it's affecting their youth, I guess, the young people.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
And I think too, I mean, it's such a hard space that you're actually working in. That child protection space is something that we really have to take our hats off to you and other people that work in that space, because it is a really heartbreaking space to be in at times. So so just say that as well.
And JB, it's really important, that space, because it's these young people. Young people are going to be, they're going to grow up and become, the person themselves. You know what I mean? It's really important that they are nurtured that way, I guess, to become that person.
100%. And the thing is that with this work, people are getting that authentic voice that they're able to have, because it's not a token voice that they're given. It's something that's real, and it's something that's brings out the passion in people, and it's like as we said before, like our mobs know what their concerns are, they know what their issues are, but they also know what the solutions are, as long as we're able to walk side by side. And it's not about anyone, it's not about any one of us three, but it's about our mobs in community getting to have their say. So
fantastic. I tell you what, in 30 years that I've been working in this space, things haven't got better for anyone. It's a bit depressing, things have kind of got worse and worse, and the stats are, more and more, I guess, alarming. And to be working in a space where there are solutions, they're Aboriginal solutions, and they're working, and they are actually starting to turn things around and creating a hopeful vision for the future, it is incredible. It is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, it's really good. I mean, I guess I know JB knows my story, but so Dad, my parents passed away really young. So my mum died when I think I was 9 years old, and Dad died when I was 13. So and back those days, I guess we're talking about 1973, 74. Back in those days, I don't recall any of the services coming to help us, but we the family sort of rallied around that whole situation, and we were kind of fostered out, not formally but informally, to other families. So it's quite interesting, and they were just they were related. I mean, my sister went to my father's side, and I went to my mother's side of the family. So it was kind of just happened, and I can't remember how those decisions were made. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and it just happened. I guess the leadership in the family just just kicked in, and they made some decisions around I guess our lives, I guess, so it was really interesting that happened. But these days, like you say, you've got all of these support services and everything that now help out with that. But yeah, it was kind of interesting, when I think back about those times and how that happened, because I don't know who made the decisions.
You
Yeah.
know, Charlie, what you've just described is exactly, what ACOs are trying to recreate in child protection, because they know that that way has worked to
Mm,
protect children and to support children. When you have this natural circle of care around a child, and you've got ways of making decisions for the child that are collective, and this collective
mm,
response with other family members and kin stepping in with, when there's a crisis or when they need support. That's the way it's always been. And
yeah.
child protection laws and, child protection practitioners to knock on doors in an intrusive, sort of compulsory, way,
Mm,
strengthen the that circle of care around the child as it's always been, and let
mm,
families meet and make decisions. That's the model of child protection, of Aboriginal
yeah.
child protection. And you don't need these intrusive practices that have just
Mm,
caused harm and are continuing to cause harm. You go
mm,
about it with compassion and care,
mm,
that your family's obviously showed you, Charlie, and it's the
mm,
way. And
yeah.
I think, not just, for Aboriginal children, I think there's a lot to learn, in that wisdom and that way for just all children, right?
Yeah.
Well, as CJ said before, I mean, this work is so important, not just for our moms, but for everyone. But the thing is, like, we're actually doing some work with the Healing Foundation at the moment around stolen gen. So you can imagine some of the stories, the horrific stories, but there's also some beautiful stories as well.
Mm.
And
Mm,
but like just hearing some of those stories and the fear around having kids taken and these sort of things. It's just it really breaks your heart when you hear these stories. So I think
mm,
that, as CJ said before, this work that you mob are doing
oh,
and everyone else is doing in that space is just so important, and it's going to be so good. And it, as we said before, it gives that authentic voice. So
Mm.
I think it's just
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell you
I
what,
think
there's some amazing leaders, the Anangu women, all of the other Aboriginal people, the strong leaders. I'm there because I can play a little bit part, Jack, but I've got a team behind me, and that includes Aboriginal researchers, and I'm hoping that one day, not too far in the future, it'll be Aboriginal people that are doing the work that I'm doing, and
mm,
that's another big part of what I'm all
mm,
about, is building capacity, sharing the knowledge that I have with others so that they can do the work within their own organisations, and Aboriginal people within the university. And Jack, this is supervising graduate researchers, yourself included. This is a really, really important part of my work, and one of the most rewarding parts of my professional life and just life generally.
mm,
It's seeing graduate researchers, Indigenous academics, just go out in the world and be the strong, amazing leaders that they become. That's my job.
mm,
And
yeah.
to really recede into the background, as you say. It's not my job to put myself front and centre. It's to mentor and support others. And, it's just amazing, the Indigenous scholarship in our academy and generally, more generally, it really is incredible. So it's not an easy journey, Jack. Stepping into the academy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what I'm about.
Well, I must say, look, I've probably known you for a couple of years now. It's been a bit of a journey for myself. I haven't told many people, to be honest. So
sorry about outed you.
no, that's all good. That's all good. Yeah, but just like when I met you and having those yarns with you, it sort of alleviates a bit of that fear as well, because I'm not your natural academic, I don't think so. Like my work is in community, and I acknowledge that, and I want that, because that's where my passion, that's where my love lays, is in community. But if we're able to get that authentic voice for our mobs from community out there, well, then I'm all for it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
And you're the one that's doing it, Jack, not me. Honestly.
Yeah, Sarah. Look, don't worry about outing him, because no one else will know. But only us three will know what you said.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's right. Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah.
So,
and plus the other 1,000 that watch this during the week. So. Nah, all good. I'm happy with that. I mean, like it's exciting, but it's a little bit scary as well.
Yeah. No, fantastic work. Yeah, and I think it also is. And not saying anything's wrong with some of the people in the past who are support workers and all that kind of stuff in this area, but and we often joke about this, Jack. We sort of say, well, they're well-meaning, but they're trying, yet maybe not doing a great job of it. But then there are others that are doing fantastic work, and it's really important that perspective, I guess, in terms of child protection from our mobs, our community people, how that should look, how that should be shaped. Instead of, as you talked about, it's their job and that's what they have to do. They have to come in. They've been paid, to come in and do the work. But sometimes it's better that it's done in I suppose partnership with the community. You know what I mean? It's got to be. It's not one way or the highway. It's really about.
I think it has to be. I don't think gone are the days, of that top-down approach where government could come in and do their so-called research and all that sort of stuff, and it just doesn't work anymore. So this is the only way that it can work.
Yeah.
Never worked. Yeah. Over 200 years, we've never got it right.
No, we never got it right. No, I don't think we're still. There's still a lot of things that are happening in communities that I'm not. Where we see that it's not right what's going on in communities. So much a lot to do. But hopefully for our young people that this new approach is going to help with their development and their lives. Becoming adults. So yeah.
And what we said too, CJ, I mean, there's so many good young leaders coming through now, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. That people are stepping up, but we do need that wisdom and that knowledge from other people to be able to help them get to where they need to get as well. So we always talk about people have got different skills and people have got different wisdom and different knowledge that they impart, and I think it's so important that we understand that it's got to be a collective. It can't be just one or the other doing the work. So
no, it's amazing. No, absolutely fantastic work. It's been really great having you on, Sarah. I mean, it's really kind of sometimes this is an area that we don't speak about too much, have we, Jack? We haven't really talked about child protection and but it's really nice to hear the stories. Once again, our stories, your story, Sarah, about being up in the NT and being part of that process and that experience, I guess, and and being able to then come back and relay that back to whoever you need to report back to. It's really important that that happens. So. Um,
And also that work in Victoria you're doing as well, VACA, all that. I mean, it's amazing work. So I mean, it needs to be acknowledged and it needs to be talked about, because there's so much bad stuff talked about when we talk about child safety. So we need to be able to get some of this. CJ and I often talk about celebration. So we need to celebrate
Yes.
this. We don't have enough of that. We always hear about the negative shit that goes on in our communities. We don't hear enough about the celebration. So I reckon good on you for doing what you're doing, and everyone else involved. It's just amazing, and it always takes a team to do it. So
Yeah.
so it is something that's very special. So I loved hearing the story about the NT as well, but I love hearing the stories about suburbia down in Melbourne as well. So
I just love talking to you, Jack, and Charlie, and this curiosity about what I do. I don't get that from anybody. It's just really nice just to have this talk about what I do and why I do it. It keeps me strong. And this reinforcement from you both. Keeps me strong in the work too, and strong for another 10 years maybe of doing the work. And I'm really hopeful about the change that I'm going to see in the next 10 years and in the years beyond. Really as I said, for the first time in my career, I think things are really starting to shift in a way that I think is really going to make a tangible difference, to communities.
It is when you get into that little sweet spot and you think, oh, this is working, this is going to be fantastic. You can see, you can envisage what's going to happen, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
Pretty
good.
exciting.
It's
good stuff.
Victoria's leading the way in child protection. And I really hope, if anybody's listening in the other states, or the other, jurisdictions, they have a bit of a look at what the ACOs are doing down here.
Yeah.
And what can be achieved, and hopefully, authority for decision making and service delivery, can, be transferred and handed to communities who, as you say, Charlie, just, know how to work with Indigenous people and know, what works. Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, and I think there's a little bit of, information and I guess knowledge that also can, transcend into the wider community, if you like. You know what I mean? And how these things are done by Aboriginal people could be there, definitely a benefit for, the wider community, if you like.
No, absolutely. And things that, are relevant not just in child protection, in mental health, the healing work, Jack, and, in health and a whole range of other, some of the values and principles and the ways of knowing, being and doing, I think they're readily transferable to different sectors, and systems. Absolutely. And you do see, this sort of work growing, in the different sectors, for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. Been an absolute pleasure. I've loved listening to the stories. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I'll hand it over to you, CJ.
Yes. Thank you. I'll echo those sentiments as well, Sarah. Thank you for coming on give us a chance to talk about something that we don't normally talk about, and it's always great to sit around and have a chat about a particular thing like that, and an important subject as well. We both, Jack and I, do a lot of stuff in mental health, and we, sit around the table with a lot of people around the country and have a talk about mental health, which doesn't necessarily happen, for people in their homes or in their communities. So it's kind of like, just shedding a bit of light on the subject and getting people to understand and raising more awareness about what's going on in that space. It's always important. And like I said, these young people that we talk about in child protection are going to be adults, and they're going to be our leaders, and we want them to be that. And we definitely need to make sure that their pathway or their journey through through teenage life and into adulthood is influenced by their early start, if you like, where they started from. So thank you very much for coming on. And now listen, before we go, we always try and find out, are you a Carlton supporter by any chance?
No, I could tell you about the family history. Grew up in Nipaluna, Hobart, North Hobart, Peter Hudson. We're Hawthorn all the way, Charlie. We played the game on the weekend against
I'll
Geelong.
tell you what.
How good was that on the weekend? What a great game against Geelong.
I'll tell you what. That was a magnificent game on the weekend. So,
best game I've seen for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was
and
great.
I'm giving up, brother. I'm giving up.
No, we're struggling, mate. I think Bossy might be gone, I think. Anyway, thanks very much.
Right. All right.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Go the Hawks.
Yeah, go Hawks. See ya. Bye.
See ya.